I see information design as the presentation of data, processes, spatial relationships, connections, and concepts in an intentional and clear manner. It's not a new discipline. I'd like to present examples of its many forms, both contemporary and historical, and the broad themes that make them effective, in the hope that they will inspire you to see them as part of a palette for your own work. This is by Katsushika Hokusai. It's the Parable of the Elephant from 1831, and it's from his great collection of woodblock prints, the Manja. Each blind monk touches a different part of the elephant and therefore has no idea what the whole elephant actually looks like. I believe that this image exemplifies the task of information design, to see the whole story and present it clearly. These are what I see as the broad themes of effective information design. Data mapping is mapping information to user need rather than decorating the information. Data density is presenting all that is known in a way that is comprehensible. Objectivity is presentation without bias. Anything else is propaganda. Clarity is presentation that is articulate and without distraction. Clarity implies rigor. Interaction. The failure to be interactive effectively is lost opportunity for understanding. Compelling format. Format that can be innovative rather than merely appropriate is more powerful. Beauty. Beautiful presentation is more effective because it is seen as more likely to work well by users. It may be subjective, but beautiful design draws people in and implies careful design to its viewers. I'm trying to figure out how to do that, but eventually they will be, yes. This seemingly peaceful scene made it possible for a gunner on the Maginot Line in France, facing a likely German attack in the late 1930s, to understand where his gun was pointed. Since the gunner was enclosed in a steel shell, it was impossible for him to see outside except for a small telescope, a periscope, that was not connected directly to the view of the gun. With this retrofit, he was able to visualize his situation. The lines across the bottom are very fine increments so that you can point something quite precisely. Walking up to this door, you immediately understand where to walk to get to the entrance of the adjacent building, because a representation of the adjacent building and its entrance are painted on the door. Can everybody see that? See the outlines of this building?
The real building behind.
It's the real building outside. It would be easy to print similar images on temporary transparent overlays on glass doors, or to otherwise adopt this concept widely. I think many people have seen variations on these. This is called a table d'orientation in French. I've always thought that ideally these devices would have a hole in the center for the viewer, with the skyline, a sculpted vertical plane of metal around the edge of the hole, so that you could look out and see the information mapped more directly. But this works pretty well. I believe that this concept can be applied to GPS-based devices as well, to give users a variety of ways of seeing the real world from a portable electronic device. This is about 6 feet by 12 feet. It's in the courtyard of the Louvre. This is the museum over here, the pyramid entrance. The Tuileries out here, this is the Seine. Physical maps like this have a wonderful tactile quality to them that makes it possible to see the surrounding terrain from different vantage points. You can simply walk around it and understand where you are from different directions. These are, unfortunately, of course, quite expensive to make. Integration of maps into real space makes possible a great range of potential trompe l'oeil effects, not only wayfinding, but electronic messaging as well. Why not have flat panel displays that do this and that can be repurposed? This is Reims Cathedral. This building has large information themes in its very structure. Since few people could read when it was built, stories important to Christian theology were placed in specific places that evolved as appropriate. A crucifix at the altar, apostles by the major entry points, Christ in judgment above the central door, saints above. Labyrinths and colored stone floor patterns representing the journey towards salvation were common. Data density can likewise be accommodated in physical devices if common understandings are employed. We have all learned to use iPods and cell phones. What else can we learn? This is Borobudur in Indonesia, in Java. It's a very different place from Reims, not only because its spirituality is Buddhist, or that it is open rather than enclosing structure, but because Buddhism's messages of the spiritual journey of life are linear. To understand this message, viewers follow an often difficult symbolic ascent up its ramps past thousands of narrative sculptures, many more in fact than those on cathedrals. To compare these two structures in terms of their information structure is to realize that data density is presented in ways that reflect the culture of its designers. This may look at first like a comic book, but that is, I think, really the point. This atypical illuminated manuscript reads much like a modern comic book. Importantly, the historical figures, much like those in contemporaneous cathedrals, look like and are dressed like people of the period of the book's creation. At the time that this was done, books such as the Iliad and the Odyssey were thought of as being actual histories. You can see the famous Trojan horse here. Few maps have a complete lack of bias of some sort, but this is an example of an unobjective one that reflects the fear of that time. You can see this is the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Spain, Northwestern Africa. At some point, this map was probably a relatively objective map in its presentation of Western Europe. And I thought that it would be interesting to know who ripped it and why. You may have seen this in the Times. It's the Super Bowl tweeter activity map, and I'm going to try to get out of here and show you how that actually works. This is at the start of the game, and as the game progresses, you can see that the fans who are located largely in different places tend to talk more as their respective teams do better or worse. And that people are beginning to talk about the halftime with Bruce Springsteen. And people are talking about commercials.
Dangerous plan. No, it's just less clear. On the score changes.
Yeah.
You have to know if this is reflecting the percentage.
Say again?
You know if this is reflecting the percentage of messages on those populations, the absolute number. In other words, just by the population.
I believe that it's the volume from the users as registered by Twitter and acquired by the, I think it's John Blow, who was the information designer for the Times. Let's see if I can get back there. I really like this map. The color choices by now are predetermined. Blue states, red states. This is a map that's based on the counties of the U.S. And what I find most interesting about this are the counties as gradients. And as you look at this, you can see why the Obama won, which was that it was a very focused campaign on those places that had the highest likelihood of getting the electoral votes needed to win. And they simply didn't go to those places where there was no likelihood.
Geographically, which one? Just down square mile.
That's right. Or McCain. Yeah. Bush lost. This oops, oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Okay, this is a still from a video animation, and it shows the hurricane development. The original animation shows the hurricane development over time, with the points of greatest intensity being this gradient from red to blue. You can see the path of the hurricane towards North Carolina, and this is superimposed over an actual satellite photo. This particular image is greatly enhanced, I believe, by the vertical exaggeration that's going on in the colored part. And I find this to be a map of great subtlety, because as you look more closely at it, you begin to see those things that you never really did understand, say, about Canada. That the grasslands of the United States and Canada, which are the much lighter green, really pop out, and you can get a much better sense of how much of this country really is actually desert. I really love the bold colors of this map. It's really a very dramatic image. You can see the Gulf Stream, which is moving from off the North Carolina coast towards Europe. And again, the places that have the highest temperatures of the Gulf Stream are in the dark red. This is a still from another video, and John, if you're familiar with John Maida, I believe that this captures Maida's ideal of simplicity, despite the fact that this is really quite complex information. It is very comprehensible because of the way he has used color in this. So it is, as you can see, an image of what's going on here. Are the water molecules in a living brain are moving through the axons, the nerve fibers, and the information is then being mapped by the special machine that does diffusion spectrum imaging, and it's a local product. This is an example of clarity in an early woodcut. It's a Renaissance book about mining, and the text and the images were so clear and so correct that they were still in use in the early 19th century. This clock detail is of only one of an array of astronomical clocks and solar system models used to calculate specific days for the church. Calculating the days is really a very complex subject, and the development of these astronomical clocks, I believe, was at the point at which information design first became connected to sophisticated technology. These clocks are still in use. Let me get back here. Some specific days occurred only once in many years. Others occurred relative to others that were variable. And together, the clocks formed a system that was in effect a mechanical computer. Denis Diderot is one of my heroes. This is the print of agriculture and a title page. Diderot was a playwright and philosopher of the Enlightenment, and he produced a vast collection of prints similar to this one for his encyclopedia. The quality varied, but this one is typical. His dedication to making all knowledge accessible was a heroic effort that was not widely acknowledged until long after his death. This is a map of Rodez, which is in southwestern France. Maybe picking up on a theme here. A lot of my fascination with information detail has to do with France, Japan, and Finland. So I'm pulling up different images here from those countries. In an age of GIS vector maps, it can be hard to appreciate the discipline, depth of knowledge, and research necessary to produce such a clear vision of terrain. It might appear at first to have a sort of almost a sketchy quality, but in fact it really isn't. The sketchiness is simply the manner in which the actual execution was applied. The planning for something like this is a fairly sophisticated endeavor. Creating design that may have subtle internal contradictions of presentation or lacks of sufficient rigor creates a world of ambiguity. And simple technology failures can defeat information design. Ambiguity in a traffic sign can lead to death. I would be very careful in a place in which it is not clear where I am supposed to walk. It has a pleasing style, but it's not very helpful. This, you may have seen this. This is now an app for iPhone and for the BlackBerry. These particular images are of San Francisco and are showing the nightclub activity of those people who have agreed to allow their cell phones to be tracked. And by having their phones tracked, the places that are hottest show up as the hottest on the maps and therefore attract more people. And I even, if I'm able to bail out here again and do this smoothly, I can show you what that actually looks like. This is the night view, and you can see the time going by there as the people move around.
That's cool. How many people roughly are doing it?
It's in hundreds. Most people opt out of it, but for those people who have to be where the hottest places are, or want to be a part of where the hottest places are, they allow themselves to be tracked.
A similar method is being used to track traffic jams. Because normally when you're driving on the road, you're passing them on multiple cell phone towers. But if you don't pass through them fast enough, that data can get recorded and you can say, oh, this conversation has been on the same cell phone tower for 10 minutes, that guy's not going anywhere. And by combining that with GPS information, there's a traffic jam going to all this.
Or you're central close to the side of the road.
Yeah, if you start getting central, it's going to break that chance of that happening.
As you can see, this is a map of the donors to Obama. And this is really as a cartographic task is one that is fairly daunting in that you want to be able to overlay gradations of density on top of an extremely jammed map. And this does that quite well with transparency and very well chosen colors. You may know about this. You can see that on Facebook I have 69 Facebook friends, and this program it's a free program, a web affinity diagram application by Nexus, and it graphs all those people you know and their connections to each other. But as of the time that I did this, I only had 69 Facebook friends. These are the friends of my daughter, who's 15. My daughter refers to my wife and me as the intros because she is an extreme extrovert. And this absolutely nails it in terms of her personality. What I love about this is that you can zoom into the information, and instead of seeing just this amazing mass of names, you begin to see how they all fit together. So we're zooming in here. And then finally down, this is a group of a family who are not actually very tightly connected to any of those other people. You can see that if you can see the very faint white lines are going off down here. These are the connections to the rest of the mass. What'd you say?
Within the Facebook interactivity mapping, what is that called?
It's called Nexus. So if you
It's not the company Nexus,
it is a company called NEXUS, and it's not Nexus Lexus.
Okay, yeah.
It's a startup that is doing this to get attention.
That's what I was thinking. I thought you meant Nexus. Okay.
This is an application that allows users who are analysts of various kinds to scan text into the application. It typically is a foreign language, and when the geographic locations are identified programmatically, and then they are mapped to a map, and the analysts are able to begin to see patterns. Typically this works with large numbers of documents, and the maps collate the data and make the patterns more explicit. So you can imagine who's using this and how it's done. This is one of my most favorite books, and as you can see, the book was done in 1957, and it is just a truly amazing book. I never go tired of this book. It's by Kees Boeke, who was a very gentle Dutch Quaker pacifist teacher who wanted his students to understand the interconnected web of life. And I continue to marvel that this book's extraordinary concept can be executed with such modest means. This was literally done with a pen by hand and ink. The book is the very best example of how a thin little thing of cardboard, paper, and ink can take you very far and bring you back in a single reading. Cosmic View is included in Mortimer Adler's Gateway to the Great Books, along with works by Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein. You can still get copies online from the Libris, ABE, and other rare book sites if you're into books like that. This is the edge of the known universe. It's taken 22 steps to get here, and by the time you have read this a few dozen times, it begins to make sense and give you a sense of just how big the universe actually is. It then goes back the other way, back to a girl who is sitting on a chair holding a cat, and then it turns out that there is a mosquito on her hand that bites her, and that the blood that comes out from the mosquito is then zoomed in on, and ultimately you wind up going down to the atoms that are within her blood. This is my definition of a compelling format. Scott McCloud is a unique person, another local boy, a theorist of comic books, no less, and his explanations will change you in a way that may sound implausible, but you will if you read the book. The book, as you can see, explains comics in the format of comics. I think that this book is becoming more widely known now, but when it came out, it was a sensation. Beauty is not overrated. Benning, perhaps the greatest late Netherlandish miniaturist, captured whole worlds in his paintings. This tiny painting is a page from what is essentially a textbook for Priest, but is a work of art as well. And what's going on here is that this is showing Priest how to carry out a rite for a funeral called the Office of the Dead. And from an early age, I could distinguish the longleaf pine from other pines because of this print. Arrett I still have the copy of this print. The longleaf pine grows in North Carolina, which is where I'm from. The Errett, the artist, presents every aspect of the needles and cones with such loving care that they truly come alive. Some of you may be familiar with the processing language at the Media Lab and the work of Ben Fry and others. These are digital plants. It's really a graph going from left to right, and it is a chart with search query volume, which is the flowering plants, and the roots are the search terms. And I find this a very witty and beautiful image. This is an image of a bat. You can see, there he is. You can see that the image is asymmetrical. This is a mesh showing the stresses on the membranes that make up the flying surface of the bat, and then his bones. These are this is the flow of the air over the wings of the bat. But I really do think that bats are cool, and understanding how they fly is made clear in this award-winning scientific illustration. And I especially like the way the bat structures are defined asymmetrically. I never really did grasp the concept of the Big Bang until I saw a large poster version of this image, which was made for the launch of the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe, WMAP, in 2003. And I would like to close with two images that use the tools of information design for art and humor. Rodolphe von Gomberg is an eminent French radiologist who, when not being a doctor, university professor, and a researcher, uses his imaging equipment to make art in a field that he created, which he calls virtual life art. Another of my most favorite books, The Snouters. This is on my very short list of books to toss in a bag in case of a fire at my house. Gerolf Steiner is a now retired zoology professor. He's 100 years old, who wrote this perfect scientific monograph of a genus of non-existent creatures, the snouters. If you look carefully at the image, you can see some flower-faced snouters munching on bees that are mistakenly intent on pollinating them. So there's one, there's another one up there, and another one. The book inspired Will Wright, creator of The Sims, to create the interactive computer game Spore. That's it. Bill.
Could you go back to the Big Bang picture there?
Okay.
Tell us what it is. I'm not sure I followed it. Sorry.
I'm not sure they can get this to go. Yep, okay. Here we go. I'll go to the very end. The thing that really amazed me is that apparently the universe really is an isolated thing in something. I know.
Cross-section of that cone, what the universe looked like at that point in time.
That's correct, as it's expanding out.
God's birthday.
It would be on that very ring right there on the right side. The WMAP is the spacecraft that has been sent out to keep on going and gathering information about the origin of the universe. This is such a large subject, it's really hard to deal with. It's one of those things that you think about when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're not thinking about money.
Like you said, the universe is a single thing, and look inside the circle to the right, and everything is in there.
Except what
outside it
is something else. Yes, I know. It's a little hard to wrap your head around that, but yes.
There's other things that currently it puts into perspective odd things, like 13.7 billion years is a huge number. And when we're talking about our economy and they keep throwing around billions and trillions. I don't know where my head is going with this, but it's very odd.
You had $1 for each year?
This is so gigantic, and yet it's only a fraction of what we're living inside now. It's weird.
Is WMAP drawn to scale there?
No.
It also shows how quickly, relatively, it went from 0 to almost what it is now. That although the universe is expanding, most of the expansion happened at the beginning.
I think that's wrong. The rapid expansion was only the size of grapefruit.
You were going to say something?
You mentioned the universe in 40 jumps. There's a film I'm sure you know called Powers of 10.
Yes, by the Ames, and that was based on this book.
Really?
Yes.
In this particular image, there's text and labels, and in other ones you like to no text at all, no description, no access, like the plant roots one. Curious something you like or don't like about the labeling of any of these?
I think this kind of thing is done by people who are less concerned about aesthetics and more concerned about making sure that people really and truly do get it. If you've ever looked at the kinds of graphics that are shown in congressional hearings or for instance, military aerial photographs, they're really hideous, but they're absolutely precise. You have no doubt about what's going on there. I do think that it's possible to do this thing with much more subtlety and grace than is shown here. But I'm so struck by the image and the concept that I can get past that. Yes.
This collection that you've shown us this evening is, I understand, just a small part of a big collection we have. So, I have a sort of general, I'm not sure if it's a technical question or philosophical one, but I'm a software engineer. My wife is an interaction designer. We've often discussed the question of sort of the equivalent of what software engineers know as design patterns as applied to things like interaction design. In sort of surveying your complete collection and the studying and looking at these things and understanding them, have you attempted to categorize or organize them in terms of particular types of ways of communicating information that can be, cataloged in a more formal way than just sort of saying, well, this uses visual information in a certain way, this uses scale or scope, or this uses, something more formal?
There is a pattern language. I mean, Tufte has been expanding that for some time. But I think that for people who are practitioners of the visual design of information, that you know that there are a lot of solutions that you can pull out of a hat. And everything else is somewhere on this scale of things. For me, the greatest challenge is finding this compelling format, like McCloud's comics, and the powers of 10 from the book by Keys Boki. I think that that's where the real challenges are. It's always pretty straightforward as a solution to make things that work well. Coming up with a compelling format is a whole lot harder.
So when you say compelling, you mean more at an emotional level?
At a level in which what you're doing is truly unique to what you're doing. And that kind of thing is much harder to do. Boki came up with something that has never really been improved upon. When Ames did it, they basically just turned what he did into a movie. The Scott McCloud's books are not reproducible. There are occasionally people who are just so original that you can't really copy them.
I'm also an artist and poet, so I guess that half of my brain sort of understands the world in a different way. It sounds like the quality you're describing falls in. It sounds like the quality you're describing is something more along the lines of an aesthetic or emotional or poetic goodness or quality than a sort of a rigid technical.
Well, I would say it has to do with having somehow being in this unique position of coming up with something that truly is not like anything else in the structure of it, not the way you're presenting it.
Are you describing something that could really be measured objectively, or are you describing something that has to do with your reaction to it?
I think that there are just some people who are just so original that nobody else can copy them. For instance, the illustrator Edward Gorey. Nobody can do a drawing like that and not think of Edward Gorey. It is just possible sometimes for people to not fit in anywhere else. And the two examples that I showed are, I think, about the only ones I can think of that are really and truly absolutely unique.
Could you go back to the slide of the French villages, the map?
French villages.
Of the reality?
Oh, yes. Okay, Rodet.
Yeah, did you say that was produced using GIS, or was this a
No. This is a roughly about was 1996, and I personally sort of went through the transition for doing maps by hand to making. Working on the earliest GIS systems where it was real hard to make a real ugly small map, and then forward from there. But to do something like this means that you have to do this in your head first. You have to understand the topography. You have to understand those things that are most important. You have to be able to artistically pull off things like the vertical exaggeration of the peaks, and then you have to lay this out in a way that's quite clean. And it's possible to do this kind of thing now in taking GIS files and then pulling them into Illustrator and doing this without a whole lot of difficulty. But in the past, it was really a very complex thing that very few people could do well.
It's just a part of a larger map? What is the content?
It is. This is just a small section. Rodet is a small village, and I got this because someone was traveling there, and then I scanned an image from a map that was a rumpled thing that somebody had used for traveling. And I was so taken with the sophistication of it that I had to have a copy of the image. Yes?
I guess I would argue that a lot of what you're saying is the quality is also not objective.
A lot of it is subjective, but I think that we're talking about presentation here, and presentation can always be seen as subjective. I don't really know how to quantify a lot of these things, only to say that they work or they don't work. And the examples, except for the explicit ones that I showed, do work quite well. But
I'm not arguing whether they work or not. I'm arguing whether you can use objectivity as one of your guidelines for manipulation.
only in larger senses, as in terms of whether things will work or not, I think.
I thought the point was that objectivity is a tool that can be used to be as transparent as possible. There are other techniques that can be used when you have different goals.
It is very hard to be truly objective about much information design. There are a number of books, Lies and, what's the name of the book, but about lies and statistics. There are books, that came from another book about maps and maps that lie. So this has been known for a long time that almost every bit of information design is biased in some way, and trying to tease apart the bias can be a difficult thing sometimes because it can be so subtle. Hi, Elizabeth.
So do you have a photographic memory, and or how do you organize your collection so that you can reference it in a project?
It's highly organized. I have everything on a 2 terabyte drive, and if you're really obsessive for a long time, things just tend to organize themselves pretty well. So it is really organized, yes. Is that it? Okay.